Servant leadership is a style of leadership focused on service to the people and organization that's being led. The goal is to create an environment where team members can work together towards common goals while feeling valued, respected, and most of all, supported. Servant leaders prioritize the needs of their team members and understand that their role is to serve rather than being served. In this podcast, we'll focus on how to build a culture of servant leadership throughout your organization, including specific questions that you can introduce in your meetings that light the pathway for personal, professional, and organizational growth. Welcome to the morebusiness.com podcast. I'm your host, Raj Khera, aka Mr. More Business, and I'm joined today by Dr. Jeff Kaplan. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Raj. Nice to see you today.
I'm really excited about our topic here, servant leadership. It is not something that I'm very intimately familiar with. I know that's something that you've had experience with. What is servant leadership? What's the core of it?
Well, so this sort of term servant leadership came out of an essay this guy Robert Greenleaf wrote in 1970, which really, if you look at like where, particularly in manufacturing and where kind of the old school way of leadership, where it's sort of a pyramid top down, you do this, because I said so, and then it kind of works its way down. Servant leadership flips that on its head. So the core is that, first of all, you're serving a mission greater than yourself, right? And so in the context of flipping the triangle, like I'm supporting my direct reports, right? What do you need? Not this is what I need. What do you need? How can I support you? Right. So those questions are asked all the time. Right. And then they are doing that to their direct reports and then and all the way down to the customers. So it really is a bottom up way of leading.
So I was going to ask you, what's the difference between servant leadership and traditional forms of leadership? And it looks like it's just a flipped model where normally a leader uses their team to support what they have to do. And what you're saying is servant leadership is completely the opposite, that the leader is there to support what the team needs to do. And if you keep trickling that down, you eventually get to the customer, which is the most important component of a company.
That's correct. Where I see leaders get lost is, an ego, making it about them, worried about their territory, who moved my cheese, right? And often the way out of that is servant leadership, right? Is wait, why are we here? Right? What's the mission? What are the customers wanting? How can I support you to help make sure that that's happening? It is a different way of thinking from the traditional way of thinking, but quite frankly, it is gaining. I mean, I told you, you wrote this, Greenleaf wrote this essay in 1970. It's gaining traction now because it's almost even more important now because like it's the solution to being in a very complex global matrix environment and with employees who are demanding connection to the work itself. Like why, they want to know why we're here. They want to be connected to a bigger vision kind of thing.
It sounds to me like being a servant leader almost mandates you being more emotionally intelligent. What are some of the other skills? What are the essential skills that are required for someone to be an effective servant leader?
Well, it's a skill is more of a characteristic, but certainly empathy, right? If I can't understand how you're feeling and certainly how my actions and words impact how you're feeling, I'm going to have a really hard time supporting you, right? Humility. I mean, two of the tenets of leading with heart, right, is, humility. People that are so stuck in their head about what's best for me can miss what's best for the organization, its customers, and the people, the other employees. I guess also just in terms of skills, right? Like I would recommend like reading, say, Amy Edmondson's The Fearless Organization or other books that talk about psychological safety, right? Creating a psychologically safe environment so that you build connection with each other, but also create a space for healthy dialogue, healthy conflict, right? So we're not making it about the people. Again, we're making it about the mission. We're here to kind of serve, others, et cetera.
Well, one of the things that a company has to do is it has to meet milestones, achieve goals. Everybody in their work has some sort of object or objective that they're trying to reach. So how do you line that up? Because if the leader is serving the people that are reporting to that leader, um, who's setting the goals? How you set the goals?
Well, so first of all, I mean, like any normal sort of type environment, you've got, perhaps the board, but certainly then the CEO that's setting the overarching strategy, right? And probably the priorities, right? But even then, even before you get to servant leadership, like you're then bringing in the different levels to begin to figure, well, what is that? How do we carry out those priorities? And sure, you're creating metrics, but you're gathering from them, like, here's where we need to get to. Here's how we're going to measure it. What do you need in order for us to get there? Well, I need resources. Okay, well, we don't have that. Well, okay, well then this is what I need. How do we get that? Right. And so it's a different way. If you're not used to saying here's a skill, instead of saying no, figure out together how. Well, we need X in order to be able to do Y.
Mhm.
Well, let's figure out how we can do this.
One of the things that every leader has to have is some degree of accountability, and usually managers hold their teams accountable. So how does accountability and collaboration play into servant leadership?
So I've been talking about three levels of accountability. And let me share with you what those are, and then I'll talk about the difference in this context, right? And so level one accountability is we're holding ourselves accountable in order to, perform, get the work done. Level two, we're holding each other accountable. So if you think of a team, right? Like I'm on that team. Level one is I hold myself accountable to deliver right results, what's expected. Level two, my teammates are holding me accountable. Like, hey Jeff, what happened to that, thing you were gonna give us last night? Level three is the manager, the leader in charge of the team is holding the team accountable. In sort of a non-servant leadership kind of base mentality, it's very top heavy in level three, where I'm constantly holding folks accountable. And I'm like the prison guard, telling everybody what to do. And like, did you do it? Did you do it? When you create a psychologically safe environment and you have this model that you're truly living out of servant leadership, people are holding themselves accountable. And then what often doesn't happen is then they're also holding each other accountable. It should be a rare event that the leader, after setting expectations and timelines kind of thing, is the one that's having to hold others accountable.
All this sounds almost utopian. Because it's you're trusting everybody to do all the stuff that they need to be doing. Everybody's working in unison. Every now and then, though, there's a performance issue where maybe someone doesn't fit with that type of culture, or it just isn't pulling their weight or needs some additional kind of guidance. Granted that that's what servant leader would do, is provide them with the guidance, but what if that person can't get there? Um, I mean, in a servant leadership type of environment, can you still, like, let go of people if you have to for performance? I mean, how does that work?
Serving the mission of the company and serving the customers and quite frankly, employees does not mean letting people underperform.
Well, this is a really big distinction, I think, and I think the way you articulated it just explained it, is when you say servant leadership, you're serving the mission of the organization. You're not serving an individual person inside the organization.
True. Though you are asking them what do you need in order to deliver results, right? Um, and you're and the idea is that you created a culture where they are holding themselves and each other accountable.
Mhm.
If that's not happening, you're not giving up level three accountability. It's like, hey Bob, what's going on? Right. But again, when you have that mentality, first you actually care about Bob, right? Servant leaders care about the growth and the well-being of the employees and happy customers, right?
Yeah.
And so we're starting there. And oftentimes there is something wrong, maybe at home or something with Bob, right? Versus just immediately coming down, Bob, you want a performance improvement plan, because I'm not happy.
Right, right. Hey, so what kind of obstacles might might limit the effectiveness of a servant leader? What kind of strategies can people use to overcome those obstacles?
Well, the biggest obstacle is having a big ego and thinking everything's about you, forgetting that you're serving a role, right? And actually, there's your solution as well, right? I'm not serving myself. I'm in a role. I'm a steward of a particular role, whether CEO or EVP or manager, um, in service to the organization, in service to its customer and its mission,
Mhm.
and write that out. And so I'll give you a personal example. So, dating myself, 2011, I was president of the local International Coach Federation. And my first month of meeting with the board, I gave him like a 10-minute overview of servant leadership. And I said, so this is how I'm going to be operating, right, as kind of the president of the board. And so fast forward, like midway, there was something that we needed done. And by the way, this was a very high performing board. Everybody, did incredible work. We had a lot of great results, but there was a thing that needed to happen. And the person whose clear responsibility it is to do that, um, wasn't doing it. And then, so she, made a couple half attempts to get it done. And like, yeah, I can't do it, and I wanted to say, "Well, figure it out. Like, it's your role. Like, if it's not your role, like, whose role is it?" And, what came out of my mouth instead is, "How can I support you?" Um, and literally it was like, "Oh, that's right. I'm operating from a servant leader mentality." I literally, before I opened my mouth, was reminding me of the model which I was operating from. And so I did it, it took me not that long. Right. And for whatever reason, I was able to get it done where she had difficulty, but it didn't matter. What went a long way is that I showed her that I was there for her and I was willing to support her regardless of how I felt about whether she was shirking responsibilities.
I think that's really a key point, right? That empathy, that awareness. I mean, what you described has a lot of emotional intelligence inside that too. So let's say there's an organization already operating on the traditional model where it's a top-down approach, and they want to explore, or I don't know if it's something you explore or you pilot inside certain divisions or something like that, or you just say, "Hey, everybody, we're now going to be starting to do it this way." You have to change habits to be able to get people to do that. So what can an organization do to try to move toward a servant-based leadership
It's a great
mindset?
question because, just to give you and I'll give you the solution, but I was working with a CEO who worked in a global manufacturing company, and the old way of doing things was a very top-down approach, right? So the old former CEO was basically telling everybody what to do. So everybody was foot soldiers, including the senior team, right? The executive team. And this guy, knowing that they needed to be more innovative and creative in order to survive the next 2 decades, um, we're going to need to change the way they think, right? They were going to the flip, kind of really be a servant leader type mentality. And that's really what he wanted to foster. He could do it. I mean, these guys, most of these folks had been there for, 20, even 30 years and were not, they were just so used to having things being told to them. And so did a couple things. One, did a series of retreats throughout the year, talked about psychological safety, talked about innovation and creativity, talked about his style. He would also meet one on one. He would drill the message one on one. Instead of telling, he would ask, "What do you think?" "I don't know." Right. We'll go back and, work together and come up with some solutions. So, at first, they're not going to believe you that, you're really wanting to do it this way. Right.
Mhm.
And then secondly, they're going to kind of lack the ability to sort of think outside the box. I also suggested to him bring in some training on like futuristic thinking and, even doing some hiring decisions around bringing in somebody from a completely different industry who was very creative in their thinking and add that person to the team and then make sure that you support that person so that, so it takes a while. It probably took this guy at least a year to begin to make real sustainable change and then ultimately find out who was able, quite frankly, to make the cut, right? Some people just weren't really going to be able to ever get on board.
Mm-hmm. So, so are there other things that a leader should do to adapt? I mean, one of the things you mentioned was that one phrase that rather than talking to somebody in a way that tells them what to do, you just flip that and you say, "What can I do to support you?" Are there other phrases that you would recommend people keep in their back pockets as ways to train themselves to adopt this habit of servant leadership?
Yeah, I generally hate why questions, but why are you doing this? Right? Having them be able to get their own introspection and look at the genesis of the decisions that they're making. Right. And so walk me through the process of you getting to this decision.
I like that. Walk me through. That's very nice.
Slow it down for them.
Yeah. Sometimes I use other terms like tell me more about your thought process for this, that kind of thing to help them articulate that. That's
It's a
very nice.
genuine curiosity rather than a judging.
Excellent, Jeff. That's a great overview on servant leadership. Are there any things that other people might want to know that we haven't covered?
I would say it'll seem trite, but organizations that do a lot to like write on the walls like their mission and and post up like stories of their work. Like the more you can do to keep that awareness going, in your speech, in your physical plan, in your language, right, in your um agendas, the better.
Keep it top of mind so people know that that's the culture of the organization is that we're serving the team members, employees, super important to the company, which then trickles down to the customers.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me today, Jeff.
Hey,
Thanks to
thanks,
everybody for
Raj.
listening.